Chag Sameach. I did not get the memo about the 10 minutes. I was going off the notion that it takes 80 minutes to bake a matzah. So that's going to be my spiel, and I'm going to try and condense it as much as possible. I'm also very daunted coming after Maureen, because really you spoke so powerfully to the prophetic voice what we're supposed to do. I'll do my best to do this much. So the transmission of our sacred legacy in 5 simple steps. There's a problem, and I'm coming from the United States, I'm from Israel. I believe I'm talking about something that is universal. The majority of Jews on the planet do not know how to Jew. Well, let's put it bluntly. There's this gigantic gap, you're talking about a gap, Maureen, about illiteracy. Most Jews on the planet are illiterate when it comes to their Judaism. I realize I'm mostly preaching to the choir here, because if you're here, you're either Jewish illiterate or you're interested in Jewish literacy. But I urge you to think about the people in your life who not only do not know the Aleph Bet, do not know the meaning of why light a candle on Hanukkah, or what a matzah really is about, and what is the spiritual, intellectual, human value proposition of Jewish life. In an age of so much communication, technology, printing, digital, you name it, with still huge gender issues to be surmounted, more people being educated than ever before in our history, the fact that Jewish illiteracy is such a huge obstacle to Jewish happiness and Jewish identity and fighting fundamentalism with knowledge and power is a huge issue. What I want to address tonight very briefly is a recipe that I've developed in the last decade or so of what might be 5 simple but not easy steps for combating illiteracy and making Jewish legacies, literacy, content alive and exciting for all of us. I'm going to try and do this on a PowerPoint, and I'm going to take card, but let's see if I can do this. Yay! All right. Here are the 5 principles. I'll explain in a moment. The first one is location, the second is transmission, the third is translation, the fourth is emotion, and the fifth is activation. I'm going to take us back in time to the very first moment in Jewish history when Jewish education publicly and officially happened. And I will do so by I'm going to have to cut and paste some stuff because it's going to, I'll go right here, thank you. So since I have indeed the Jewish Theological Seminary, I will start with a quote from Rabbi Ismar Shorsh, the former chancellor, that talks about this moment in time. So I'm sure you're familiar with a Torah service, right? Raise your hand if you've been to one recently. Keep your hand up if you had a fascinating, scintillating, dramatic time. Joe, please do. We need to throw them together. It is not often the most exciting of Jewish events, but it once was. Rabbi Shorsh says the following: the Torah became the bedrock of Judaism not so much by assertion as by ritual. The progressive chanting of Torah from the beginning to end every Shabbat in the synagogue transformed the Jews into a people imprinted by a book. Its narrative functioned as the unifying meta-history of the nation and the building blocks of public discourse. The synagogue developed into the national theater in which scripture and liturgy converged to reenact weekly the awesome transmission of the Torah at Sinai. I'll skip the rest for now. We're going back to the very first Torah service in history and the 5 principles that were alive then that I want to suggest ought to be alive today. Not just in a synagogue or in a, whatever this is, classroom, when Torah is being transmitted, but every single time we convey Jewish life to somebody else. So the first one, thank you, Shoshana. This lovely illustration of Ezra, and let's go back to one more, and one more. Cheers. All right. The book of Nehemiah, chapter 8, describes a moment in time, roughly 2,500 years ago, when the Jews are back in Zion from the Babylonian exile. They have 2 leaders, Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra and Nehemiah created Judaism as we know it today, and one of the first and biggest achievements is Jewish literacy. They try to give people Jewish identity by demanding the divorce of Jews from non-Jews. That failed. They therefore did the following. Chapter 8. All the people gathered themselves together as one into the open place that was before the water gate, and they told Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the Torah of Moses, which God had commanded to Israel. And Ezra the priest brought the Torah before the congregation, both men and women, and all that could hear with understanding on the first day of the 7th month. The water gate of Jerusalem, Shar HaMayim, is a public square. Think of a public space in your own lives. Where do you go as a public place to engage in conversation? Public places. Cafes. A mall. One more? A pub, perhaps, or a park. Online, where do you go? Facebook, perhaps? YouTube? TED. All right, so Ezra does the following. He's already built a temple in Jerusalem. It's up. It's the religious headquarters. But for the first time, the Torah comes out publicly as an educational transmission ritual. It doesn't happen in the temple. It happens in the mall. It happens in the place where water happens, where the people already are, men and women, and all who could understand. So the first rule in making literacy happen and reaching your public audience is go to where they are. Location, location, location. Number one rule in New York real estate. The number one rule in Jewish literacy. Figure out where your audiences are, who they are, the 100%, and find that location. Limud is one great example. But when synagogues are empty, as they are throughout the world, we have to ask ourselves, where do we go to make Torah and Jewish literacy alive? Ezra got the answer. The Watergate, public square. So that's our first rule here. Location. Reach all your audience. The second rule is transmission. Look what's happening here. The book of the Torah of Moses, Sefer Torah Moshe. This is the first time in Jewish history we have the object known as the Torah scroll. Prior to this, Torah was Be'al Peh, oral. There's a few mentions of fragments of writings or books used by the king or the priests, but this is a public spectacle. Remember the first time you used a computer or an iPad or a PowerPoint? Think of the Jews standing, the Judeans rather, in this public Watergate on that first day of the 7th month, and he whips out a scroll, probably made out of papyrus. In the 5th century BCE, the written word is an innovation. It's the newest technology of the day. Ezra imports it from the Babylonians. He brings it to the Judeans and he says, look, old idea in a new transmission. How you will transmit your complicated ideas, certainly Jewish ones, requires transmission. The second principle. Use a PowerPoint. Use a movie. Use theater. Use whatever it takes to take these old 5,000-year-old concepts and transmit them in new ways. Ezra understood technology, and he wows them with a book, which is really a scroll, and he uses technology to convey and broadcast the story. 1 and 2. What happens next is that the people, you read from it in front of the open place that was before the Watergate from early morning until midday. That's a long time, 6 or 7 hours. In the presence of men and women and all those who can understand, and the ears of all the people were attentive to the book of the Torah. Attention, learning, education. Next, please. Okay. Of course, the thing about technology is that it's sometimes tricky. Okay, here comes principle number 3. Ezra stands on a pillar of wood, a pulpit. This is the first bima in history. Probably people can see him, as you can see me now, which they had made for the purpose. And beside him stood, here goes, Matitya Shema Amniya Uriah Hilkiah Maasiyah on his right hand, on his left hand, Pedaya, Mishael, Malchiah, Hashum, Chashbedana, Zechariah, and Meshulam. We don't know who these people are. We assume they are the board of directors or the funders who get to be on stage, have his back, and say, look, people, this is a big deal. We're all here. The question, of course, is how much money did they have to give Ezra for this campaign to get into the Bible? That's a big endowment. Anyway, thank you to them. We care about the next group of people, really. Ezra opened the book in the sight of all the people, for he was above all the people. When he opened it, all the people stood up. And Ezra blessed the Lord, the great God. All the people answered, Amen, Amen, and lifting up their hands and bowed their heads and fell down before God with their faces to the ground. This is ancient Jewish yoga. More importantly, this is participatory ritual. He transmits the idea in a spiritual, religious context for all to learn and be involved. And here's what happens next. Thank you. Updates later. Joshua, Bani, Sherebiah, Yamin, Akub, Shabtai, Hodaya, Maaseiah, Kelita, Azariah, Yozabad, Hanan, Penaiah, and the Levites enabled the people to understand the Torah. And the people stood in their place. And they read in the book in the Torah of God distinctly and gave the sense and caused them to understand the reading. Up there in the Hebrew, Lau-Levie mevinim et ha'am LaTorah. Whoa, what's happening here? Our third principle, translation. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you speak Hebrew fluently. Fact of the matter is, most Jews on the planet today and always do not. And the very first time in Jewish history, the Torah comes to the public square, it comes out in split screen. Hebrew and Aramaic. The written language, the spoken language. Torah shebichtav and Torah shebe'al peh. Ezra is an educator. He understands transmission. And so translation happens here. The Levites and all these people with the funny names translate the Torah into Aramaic. We don't know how. Were they standing in a row and broadcasting? Were they walking in little groups and whispering? Were they scripted? We have no idea. But we know this. To make our ancient legacy alive today, it requires translation. Not just the vernacular, Hebrew into English, but ancient into new. The concepts, the context have to be conveyed in new ways that speak to the heart and mind of every living Jew. Translation is key. My work with storytelling in the last 13 years has been about translating the Torah service, bringing the mevinim, the mavens, back into circulation. But it goes way beyond the Torah service. The translation of ancient into modern is key to making the Torah alive. And those of you who are great understand what I'm talking about. We've got 2 more principles left. 5 minutes. Perfect. Okay. Here comes next. Nehemiah, who was the governor, and Ezra the priest, the scribe, and all the Levites that taught the people, said to the people, "This is holy to the Lord your God. Don't mourn, don't weep." All the people wept when they heard the words of the Torah. Great question, not for now. Why do the Jews weep in the very first moment of the Torah publicly chanted in the public space? Great. Think about that. I'm teaching about later tonight. You can come and talk. But basically, we think that they're weeping because they're very moved, or because they're very scared, because something momentous is happening. Here's the 4th principle, emotion. You want to make the education reach home? Don't just be intellectual. Don't just talk about statistics. Move us. Speak to our heart. Make us weep. For whatever reason, Ezra and Nehemiah did what they did. They made the people weep. And those tears made it into the Bible. It's part of how we transmit our legacy. Emotional intelligence. The full package. So the people weep for whatever reason, and here comes the 5th, and in my opinion, the most important principle. Then he said to them, "Go your way, eat the fat, yes, and drink the sweet, better, and send portions unto him for whom nothing is prepared. For this day is holy to our God. Neither be you grieved, for the joy of God is your strength." And the Levites still told the people, "Shh, hold your peace, for the day is holy, neither be you grieved." And the people went their way to eat and drink and send portions and to make great mirth, because they had understood the words that were declared unto them. What is the 5th principle? Activation. Ezra and Nehemiah tell them, "You've got Torah, now go home, feed each other, feed the poor, build community, eat together." Community is the bottom line, is the end goal of Torah. Jewish education is there that we are better people and take care of the people in our midst and take care of each other. 100% of who we are. So the 5th principle here, for every single time we transmit our favorite legacy, The bottom line is not Jewish. The bottom line is human. The bottom line is community. Torah in the service of a better world. And Ezra and Nehemiah understood that. They created the first Torah service in history with the intention of waking up the human soul to its full potential, giving Jews the book, the story, the legacy, translated, emoted, activated into what it really should be in the world. That is the meaning of light unto the nations. And in the Watergate of Jerusalem, 2,500 years ago, Ezra and Nehemiah understood that, created the form, the central form of Torah that is still alive all those years later today. Let me end with one quote. These are the 5 principles. This is from a book that I'm hoping to finish one of these days. When we choose to gather and tell our stories matters just as much as what stories we choose to tell and how we choose to translate them. Whether or not we translate our histories into relevant currency will impact our levels of literacy, engagement, and care for our traditions and for each other. If moved and inspired, we will cultivate responsibility, activating words into acts of justice and compassion, helping to transform our world into a better place. Amen.